So one of the things, again, this is like I said with Virginia, there's a lot of overlap between the things that we know and the things that we do. You know, we're both business owners. We're both in Generation X. We both have multiple degrees, and we both have work outside of our own companies. But the other thing is, you know, as individuals who also are leaders, we also have to understand how to transfer knowledge between each other. So even outside of your companies, you're transferring knowledge with individuals who might need to need to understand your business processes, need to understand your culture in order to be effective in working with you. So before we get started, there's a couple of housekeeping things. We will be taking a few polls as we go along the way to keep the conversation engaging. So you will be asked to take these polls along the way. As a note, you know, we're on this journey that we're going to meander through this process to talk about, one, the introduction and context around knowledge management or knowledge transfer. We're going to talk a little about trends in changing demographics because that also is impacting organizations, your organization even, as demographics change in your neck of the woods. We'll look at the benefits and the barriers that are associated with knowledge transfer, and then setting you up for success. And then finally, some final thoughts. So with that, Amber, can you bring up the polls, and let's take each of these polls one at a time. The first will be to get an idea of who we are as a generation as we work, as we sit in this seminar, but also as in the workplaces that we are respectively working. So please take a moment to complete the survey.
The survey is completed. We have traditionalists born 1925 to 1945, 0%. Baby boomers born 1946 to 1964, 8%. Generation X born 1965 to 1980, 62%. Millennials born 1981 to 2000, 31%. And Generation Z born 2001 to 2020, 0%.
Excellent. And this bears out what we will see as far as trends in the workplace and trends in the generations as far as the U.S. is concerned. Now, it will also be similar in other locations internationally because it really is based on who's in the workforce currently. So thanks for that, Amber. Now let's bring up the next survey or poll. How effective has your organization been in documenting and capturing the knowledge of departing experienced workers? And this is critical because, you know, one of the things we find ourselves in is more and more people are leaving the workplace. And then, of course, you have new generations that are entering the workplace. The thing that we want to be able to do is make sure that those individuals are equipped who are coming into the workplace to actually be successful. Because as much as they are successful, we will be successful.
Okay, the results are very effective. There are clear and accessible resources available, 0%. Somewhat effective, but improvements could be made in documentation and knowledge sharing, 58%. Not very effective, valuable knowledge often resides with individuals and get lost, 42%.
And again, these numbers are so critical because they will marry with some of the information that I will share with you as well. So it's not that your organization is any different than any other organization, it's that the whole concept of knowledge transfer is still something that we as humans are still trying to grapple with, because there is so much more information and knowledge in the world than it was 10 years ago versus 20 years ago versus 100 years ago. And that's because of the advancements in technology. There's more information than we can ever hope to consume or even hope to manage as individuals with our human natures. So what is knowledge transfer? It's quite simple. Knowledge transfer is a simple process of sharing information with someone else. Now, who that someone else is determined on you and your organization. Some organizations do have a need to communicate with not just their employees, but people outside of their organization in order to ensure that the business mandates and the objectives of the organization are well understood. You might have partners in a B2B situation. They need to understand, how to do business with you and how to communicate with you as far as the technology is concerned. So there's just all these different pathways in which we interact with other individuals, and we need to ensure that not only we can communicate effectively, but also collaborate with them. And that does require sharing knowledge and sharing information. So when you look at this slide, it said easy is an easy method by which a company can transfer its know-how and expertise internally or to customers. The easy is misleading, because if it was so easy, everyone would be doing it and everyone would be doing it well. So even in our previous poll, we saw that some organizations are doing okay, while other organizations are still trying to find their way as far as knowledge transfer is concerned. So let's put things in context. People are leaving the workforce, particularly baby boomers. We can see in our poll regarding the generations that we had no one in particular from the traditionalists, because most of those individuals have left the workforce and they're probably not going to come back in major numbers. And that leaves us with mostly baby boomers who are now leaving the workforce because they're reaching the age of retirement. You've got the Gen Xers, such as myself, who are currently the largest, well, not the largest, but one of the largest groups within the workplace at this time. And then we saw that millennials, which is a larger body of individuals who've come into the workforce within the recent decade, are certainly making strides as far as leadership and also as far as just their expertise they're gaining and building. And that building is not just simply from their own knowledge, but also from engaging with other individuals in the workplace, like the Gen Xers and the baby boomers. But outside of that, organizations are finding themselves working with up to 5 generations in the workplace. You might be one of those organizations and is struggling with new talent to get them up to speed and quickly to contribute to the organization's success. And then our objective here is to provide some insight in how knowledge transfer can help improve collaboration and productivity within the organization. And when we look at this slide, let's think about the fact that organizations are living, breathing entities. And there is no one point in your process whereby knowledge transfer is not important. It's important in every aspect. It starts with attracting new talent all the way through the separation of employees. The new talent that comes in your organization, they might be new, but they might not be someone who has experience, or they might be someone who has little experience or a lot of experience. But with the individuals who are leaving the organization, particularly those individuals who are leaders or who have extensive experience, subject matter expertise, they have knowledge that's necessary and important for individuals who are coming to the organization to have as well. So from employee attraction all the way through employee separation, we are still trying to figure out where we need to manage this knowledge and also how we transfer it so that the business can accomplish its goals. So let's look at the baby boomers. So the baby boomers, and we're actually going to get into some trends now. So baby boomers are leaving the workplace 50% of the baby boomers are leaders, and those leaders are leaving the workplace at approximately 4 million yearly. So every year from now until there's less than 4 million baby boomers in the workplace, we will have approximately 4 million individuals leaving the workplace, taking that knowledge with them. That means that we also have 21%, about 21% of the people are not leaders, and they, in fact, have knowledge that they are transferring or they're currently in the process of transferring. So of those 56%, that 56%, they did transfer the knowledge they had. 21% are still transferring knowledge, and then about 23% are unknown as to whether or not they're going to transfer that knowledge or not. And sometimes that's not by design, but when we actually, for instance, have rifts or layoffs, individuals typically don't have time or not given afforded the opportunity to transfer the knowledge. That knowledge walks right out the door without anyone gathering it, collecting it, or mining it. And then on the other half, the aging workforce knowledge transfer, only 57% of retiring employees pass on their invaluable experience or expertise. That means 43% of the knowledge walks out the door, leaving a void of about $3,000 penalty for employee for companies, meaning you basically lose, you end up paying the cost of an employee trying to understand your systems, understand your processes, understand your culture for every person that comes into the organization. So there is a hidden cost that we don't oftentimes capture. And then we also have to think, if you look at the projections around the number of individuals 65 plus, over time to 2023, that number of individuals is going to steadily increase. But there will be decrease of people who are 25 and under by 2032. So that means we'll have more older people in the workplace or in the US that are eligible and willing to work versus the number of young people who are in the US who are willing to work. So for organizations where you have a need for young workers, younger workers rather, or individuals who fit that particular category, there will be less of them to actually employ. Now, typically, when I was growing up, we'd be the individuals who would be applying for fast food jobs and things of that nature. And so organizations who deal with a lot of young people will find themselves somewhat short. But you can even see it today in our workplace when you go into the grocery stores or you go into a different environment where you expect someone to be of a younger age, and you might find someone older at the register or older assisting you in whatever capacity that position is required. So we can actually see the visual effects of the changes in demographics and the need for people to actually stay in the workplace longer. Whereas we see a lot of help wanted signs for places where we think, oh, why do they have a problem with help needed? Because typically, as I said, when I was growing up, I would be in those, I would be looking for those opportunities to fill those jobs. So what can we expect in available workers over the next few years through 2032? We will see, again, a slow proliferation, a gradual proliferation of older workers by 2032 who are 65 and older. As you can see, the growth rate shows from 3.1 in 2002, gradually increasing to 8.5 by 2032. The opposite applies to individuals who are 16 to 24. You can clearly see that in 2002, the number or the percentage of those individuals, which is 15.4 million rather, is slowly decreasing to 11.4 million by the time we arrive in 2032. So there will be a decrease in the number of younger workers at that age level, given the next 10 years or so. And even beyond that, up until 2100, I think the trend continues. And that also has to do with the fertility rate that's currently in the US. So this also leads us to understand that despite a softening labor market, Gen Z is poised to take over baby boomers in the full-time workforce by early 2024. So even though baby boomers have been like one of the larger populations in the workplace, Gen Z is now starting to creep up and will overtake the baby boomers in 2024. That means with these young individuals in that particular generation, they will need individuals to transfer knowledge to them so that they can be effective in your organizations. And we know that because we understand that organizations are complex entities. They have cultures, they have issues that deal with politics, but they also have complex business processes. And that knowledge resides in the heads of the baby boomers who are leaving now, Gen X, who is still in the workplace and will be for some time. And so we have to figure out how to bridge the gap between those individuals who are currently in the workforce with those who will come into the workforce. So let's go to another chart, another poll rather. And this poll is with experienced workers leaving, how confident are you that their knowledge and skills will be successfully transferred to younger colleagues? So again, this is the thing that we've been discussing, so we'll get a better idea, more specific question about how people feel regarding the generations that are in the workplace and the knowledge transfer to those younger colleagues.
Okay, 7% very confident. Our company has a strong knowledge transfer program. 50% somewhat confident, but there are concerns about gaps and lost information. 43% not confident. There's a risk of losing valuable expertise.
We understand that. And that, again, aligns with what we just discussed, right? Is that there are some great concern around these things. And I suppose that, as we go through this process, we will also identify some of the causes because we do have a poll that deals with that as well. It's a struggle. For those who are doing a great job of it, bravo to you. We would certainly reach out to you as an expert in that area and like to learn more about how you can share your ideas around how to be a great organization for knowledge transfer. And for those who are struggling, this is something we're all dealing with. And so the thing that we have to do is pool our resources together in order to create an environment where we can have those conversations around, what are the best practices. So it certainly is not something that's isolated within any particular domain or with any particular house within an organization, but it is a collective body of knowledge that we all have to utilize in order to be effective in this area. So when we think about knowledge transfer, there are 7 major categories we can gauge when we manage, maintain, and create knowledge. Knowledge is created all the time. It's either done so through human intervention or machine intervention. Human intervention is we create processes and procedures, we do activities, we do things that we communicate verbally, through text, through other means of communication that allow us to transfer that knowledge. But we also use systems and machines that actually collect data, and that data is at least maintain within the properties of that machine or within that data set that could be utilized as a source for creating more knowledge, but also transferring that knowledge. A lot of times we don't necessarily have the expertise in-house in order to understand how to extract that information from those systems in order to make it effective for knowledge transfer. But as you know, with the oncoming generation of new technology around artificial intelligence, particularly generative AI, it will be able to provide some assistance to you in actually looking at your data and looking at the information that you communicate and share and extrapolating key information out of that that can be used as a source or repository for people to learn from. Information happens in different ways, like socialization. When you meet with people and have conversations with people, that information is the information that's in somebody's head. It's what we call tacit knowledge. And then introspection. Introspection is looking inside and thinking about things. And that information that you have within your own self is not necessarily something that is deposited out in a system or shared with everybody else. It is what you know. We have externalization, or information that is expressed as a way that we interact with the rest of the world and how they expect to engage with us. And then we have what we call a combination. It's a conversion of this explicit knowledge into other variants of explicit knowledge. So that would be, I take some implicit knowledge, my experience, I'm reading material, and then I create a document or a procedure that is also available to others. That's that explicit knowledge from a book being expressed as explicit knowledge as a standard operating procedure. The internalization is the conversion of this explicit knowledge into knowledge that we actually execute. So I read a book, I understand the concept, I understand the constructs. I'm now going to actually go and try, and through my experience, I'm understanding, how this process is supposed to work. And so that knowledge has now become a part of me as an individual in my knowledge repository. So that makes it tacit. And then conceptualization is, again, creating tacit knowledge from real work actions. So you're working on something that you've never tried before, you experiment, and you find a successful conclusion to whatever your experiment is. You didn't know the answer before, but now you know it. That becomes a part of your tacit knowledge or knowledge that's known to you. And then reification, the activity of bringing tacit knowledge into action. And that is like basically taking it and taking your knowledge that you have and creating models for people to understand, and what we would call like a mental model. So we will see a mental model of knowledge transfer in our next slide. And so you'll understand what that reification is. So here we have this model, and this model is explicit knowledge, and then it's tacit and explicit knowledge. So this diagram is a concept or a construct of someone's thinking, and that's what makes it that reification knowledge. Is somebody took their idea or thoughts behind something and modeled it in some form or fashion, so that even though it doesn't give you the details, it does give you an idea about, what these two things are talking about. So for instance, explicit knowledge is like manuals, videos, databases. So these are what we call almost like hard knowledge, or knowledge that can be seen, touched, read. It's available for you to actually put your hands on or put your eyes on or understand and see through technology. And then tacit and implicit knowledge are things that are inherent in individuals. For instance, individual skills. We can see them demonstrate their skills, but I can't look at a person and know that they are a fine musician and they are able to play the piano. I can only know that when they actually express that. And then expertise, all of these things are expressed, and that's when we see them as this tacit and implicit knowledge. So organizations have to understand, one, how to capture this explicit knowledge, but then also how to capture the value behind tacit and implicit knowledge. Now, I know this is somewhat of an eye chart, but let's talk briefly about the benefits of knowledge transfer in organization. So, there are several things that are important as a benefit. So, you want to build knowledge sharing culture. The one issue that most organizations have, just as they do with DEI, is there is not a culture, meaning the organization seriously takes this as something that's valued and everybody is focused on it. Like DEI is not the director of DEI's responsibility. DEI, B, which is belonging, right, is the responsibility of the entire organization. Much like knowledge transfer, building this knowledge sharing culture is not one individual's responsibility, it's everyone's responsibility. For instance, when an individual walks into the organization, I personally make it my responsibility to go up and greet them, and then to actually explain to them and express to them what the culture is at the organization. Because coming from another organization, they might have a different idea of what to expect. I try to help them find information that's going to help them be successful. I transfer information that I have to them that's going to be successful. That could be through word, thought, or deed, meaning I could actually hand them a document. We could have conversations over coffee or whatever it is. So it's everybody's responsibility to actually build that knowledge sharing culture. If one or two people are doing it within the team and you have 10 people on the team, that means you're failing. That means 80% of the people are not doing knowledge transfer within that team. So everyone on that team should be responsible for sharing their knowledge. And then the other thing is the benefit is avoiding reinventing the wheel. How many times have you started working on something and someone says, hey, let me show you. We already know how to do that. So you don't have to go through the pain that I went through when I learned it, right? That is a tremendous value to organizations, because when you're reinventing the wheel sometimes, particularly if you're not improving that wheel, you're losing productivity. You're taking away from the organization. So if you're improving, that's one thing. But if you're just doing the status quo just because you didn't know before, you're actually wasting cycles. It also allows you to retain the knowledge from employees leaving your organization. That is so critical. I'm on a project right now. I have one key person that knows almost everything that the team needs to know. The individual left the organization. So now we have to find 4, 5 people that has the knowledge that individual had, or find another subject matter expert within the organization in order to fill that gap. And as you know, that is highly unlikely. So you will lose cycles just because that knowledge just walked out the door. And then collective knowledge helps with new ideas. So when you have individuals who take their knowledge and collaborate with one another, you can be more innovative and come up with some new ideas that will help the organization. Another benefit is nurturing and creating a better learning environment. When people are willing to contribute their ideas to a conversation or to a topic, it helps everyone. Reduce internship time. How many times have you brought an intern in? Intern sitting at a desk, intern doesn't know what to do. Interns are simply wasting time. They're actually not benefiting, and you're not benefiting because you're not utilizing them as early and quickly as possible. Because if you don't have knowledge transfer within the organization, if you don't have a resource or repository that really fits their particular needs, then you're going to also miss out on an opportunity. And what that also means is that knowledge has to be in a form and fashion that's useful for the individuals who are consuming it. So, for instance, if you bring in someone who's legally blind and you don't provide information in a form that is going to actually help them to do their job. For instance, they might need something that would braille because, of course, they can't read the screen unless they have a screen reader. And it would be disrespectful if you brought them a video to watch, right? So we have to be mindful of the individuals who we're actually sharing information with, their particular needs at the time they need it. And then this knowledge transfer also helps to ramp up productivity. Not a lot of cycles, wasted time. And then it assists in transition to perform new roles. So, for instance, I have worked in many capacities in this organization I currently work in. I've done business process improvement. I've done digital transformation. I'm currently an agile coach, and that's only because one, I was able to transition into these new roles because there was information available for me to actually uh, understand what was required and then to meet those requirements. Okay. Do we, I want to stop for a moment. Do we have any questions?
Where's my hand? See, where's my? I have a question.
Sure.
Well, I would just a little comment is that kind of getting into that knowledge transfer. That I think that sometimes you can look at knowledge transfer as being like you have this person who's been there a long time, you have this young person coming in, the older person has to embark the knowledge onto the new person, and then they can leave. And that's very like kind of systematic, ching, 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 ching. Whereas actually what we're having is this diversity of generations coming together that all have really cool things to learn from each other. And that especially around things like technology and things like that, younger generations are often coming into work settings and they're teaching the older generations stuff around technology. They're learning all this other new stuff. They're kind of coming up with new systems to do things together. And so I think it's like, and I think under a collaboratively learned environment, people thrive a lot better. They learn better. And it's not just like, I need to learn from this older person who then needs to teach me this thing. It's like we've all kind of learned from each other. And then also becomes that maybe that younger person steps into a new role having been kind of had that positive interaction from above. Am I making any sense?
Yeah, absolutely. You got to think about it this way, right? So everybody has some type of subject matter expertise. Like I
Right.
said, organizations have processes in place that if you are new to the organization, you walk in the organization, you don't have a clue because you worked at IBM before. Now you're coming to work at Caterpillar. Caterpillar might use, certain applications that are familiar to you. They might use Microsoft Office. IBM might use, Google Sheets or whatever it is, Google Workspace. And so those kind of things you can trade off on. But when you actually get down to the systems and the actual processes, right? Your
Yeah.
processes are unique to your organization in many cases. The
Yeah.
only time it doesn't matter is if it's a process that typically at every organization, like accounting, right? So even within that, you use different systems, you have different stuff, processes. And as you said, everybody comes in an organization with the hopes of learning, but they also want to have the opportunity to share and teach as well.
Right.
And you're absolutely right. An organization that adopts that way of thinking about knowledge transfer can be much more successful if it's a one-way street on transferring knowledge.
Right. All right, cool. Thanks.
Thanks, Catherine. Okay, so Amber, we're ready for the next poll. What do you see as the biggest obstacle to effective knowledge transfer across multiple generations in the workplace?
All right. The results are 44% lack of formal documentation or training programs, 22% differences in communication styles and technology preferences, 33% time constraints and competing priorities, 0% reluctance of experienced workers to share their knowledge.
Okay. So yeah, absolutely. That lack of formal documentation or training programs. And it goes back to this. If you don't make it a part of your process to actually document things as you go, it will never become a part of your process. And knowledge transfer is not going to happen. You actually have to start to adapt that as a part of your policy. Now, the thing about documentation is people say, well, documentation gets outdated. You're absolutely right. The good thing is that knowledge or information can be updated, right? So you can't put everything in print and then have to go print out another 100 pages on a procedure. If you put that information in electronic or digital format, many organizations do these days, you put it in a PDF, you put it on a web page. Those things can be updated, and the cost of managing that is only the cost of the individual actually changing it. If somebody wants to print it out, they can print it out. But know that anytime you print most information, it's almost immediately outdated because things change so much. The other thing is some of the stuff can be captured as a part of your systems, right? So systems have places where you can actually add documentation that's related to a particular process. So we need to make sure that within our systems, wherever possible, we actually take advantage of that. And then, as I said before, with the onslaught of artificial intelligence and generative AI, it will help you in that endeavor, not as a tool that does knowledge transfer for you, but as a side saddle tool that can help you actually accumulate information and make sense of it. My biggest issue with most information repository is trying to find something. If you put in a file structure, what file, what folder, what year? And then the other thing is you put it in a search page, okay, I'm getting 1,000 results back. Well, with a little bit more knowledge around how and expertise around how to query for information, artificial intelligence will be able to help you to get the most related, updated information to your particular question. So these things are things that are constantly in development, and it will only get better. Our goal is to figure out how to actually structure our information so that we can make sure that that happens in an effective way. So we just talked about some of the issues around the concern around knowledge transfer. And here we see that there are some barriers that hinder knowledge transfer in a company. Inadequate documentation. We just talked about that was one of the top reasons. Cultural and social challenges, communication challenges, and no authorization or authorized plan in place. So if you don't have policies and procedures around what's important, what needs to be documented, if there's not a desire within an organization to create a culture of knowledge transfer, you can't do it. That involves more than just, HR. It has to also involve IT, it has to involve every manager, every director. The leader has to say that knowledge transfer is important. And particularly, as I said before, when you know you have talent walking out the door, either voluntarily or involuntarily, if you have a succession plan that's developed, a succession plan is basically about getting the next person into the role of someone who might be leading the organization, which means you also should have knowledge sharing, and you should also have information associated with that transition so that that person can assume that role, pick it up, and grow in that role successfully. Much like Catherine alluded to, you have young people that come into the organization, they bring their knowledge and expertise. They're bringing things to the table that maybe the organization didn't have before, and they're growing into higher level positions and roles. Now, that same desire to share information with others as they came into the organization should be a part of who they are expected to be. So you came into the organization as a knowledge share. We expect you to continue that as you grow into your respective role. So organizations struggle with knowledge transfer for several reasons when experienced employees retire and new employees and inexperienced employees are hired, right? So it's just not the new employees, because new employees can come with a wealth of knowledge. if you left, the company you were working for previously with 20 years of experience and you walk into another organization, it's more than likely you're not going to need a lot of help on how to do your job. So it's not just the idea that new employees, but inexperienced employees are certainly ones who will need this information. So there is a tacit knowledge gap. So experienced employees often hold that tacit knowledge that how to do something that's not necessarily written down. There's a lack of succession planning. And when you don't have any succession planning, when people just leave the organization or are terminated from the organization, but you don't have a plan in order to keep that knowledge, then it's going to get lost. The other thing is limited time and resources. So you have to bake in time as a part of your process and expectations within the organization, particularly on things that are critical to the organization, right? So not every process needs to be prioritized for knowledge transfer, but those critical parts of your process where someone might be highly knowledgeable about something, that needs to be documented. And oftentimes we get comfortable with that person working in an organization. We feel they're not going to go anywhere. And for the most part, for 20 years, they didn't go anywhere. But all of a sudden, they decided, I'm retiring. Or someone made them a sweet deal. And unfortunately, we have people that leave the organization for other reasons. As you know, in COVID-19, many people didn't survive COVID-19. So we lost a lot of knowledge with those individuals as well. So there are unexpected times that people leave the organization and that knowledge goes with them. Then there are generational differences. And by generational differences, I'm not saying that one generation knows more than the other, except when you come into certain specific fields of expertise. The generation will know based on their experience. So I could have somebody who's a millennial, they could have 10 years, let's say 10 years of experience as an accountant. You could have a baby boomer that has 10 years as an accountant. Really, there's no difference in their knowledge, right? They both were in the accounting for 10 years. It's those newer generations that don't have that knowledge and experience. So we have to be mindful of that. Siloed information. How many times have we been in an organization where Department A keeps their information separate from Department B? They will not share how they do particular processes. All you know is at the end of the day, you get a document that comes across your desk. You don't know who created, how created it, but you need to do something with it. And so if organization would start to break down those silos, then that knowledge sharing would flow across the organization. There's a lack of incentive and motivation. If I'm not incentivized to share my information and I'm a subject matter expert and I continually get good performance reviews because I do a great job, but nobody knows how to do my job, that's a problem. You can't reward people for keeping information to themselves. And most people believe that keeping information for themselves is the way to stay valuable. But you also have to remind yourself that those valuable people are a three-legged stool in your organization. So if they go, whatever work they were doing is going to go with them. And that process is going to be hampered because that person left without transferring that knowledge or communicating that knowledge to others. And then we have inadequate technology and tools. So, like I said, me and Regina have worked together before on a couple of different projects. One of the things that we find, and this is also true of organizations who don't update their technology, but a lot of municipalities are outdated as far as their technology is concerned. And so when new individuals come into the organization, it becomes quite challenging for the practices of knowledge transfer to actually occur successfully. Sometimes it's your processes, but sometimes it's the actual technology that does not act as a good repository or a good tool for collecting information or even for managing that information. And or so more than anything else, protecting the information, right? So we have to make sure that our tools and technologies marry with what we're trying to accomplish. That means we need to look out in the spectrum in the workplace, not just in the workplace, but outside of the organization. At what's the latest technology that's within our ability to afford and ability to adapt that might help with what we're trying to accomplish. And nowadays, given the fact that you have so many subscription services, you might be able to subscribe to something that's going to help you do some particular form of knowledge transfer and knowledge management. The good thing is that a lot of these tools now, for instance, when you think about Microsoft Office, they have some artificial intelligence built into tools like Word and Excel that will help you craft knowledge. They have tools like the new Cassandra for Microsoft, and I'm not plugging Microsoft, but that will do some type of artificial intelligence to help you actually generate information and use that as a jumping point to actually create these repositories or documents of information that might be useful, videos, et cetera, that might be useful in your knowledge transfer. So think outside of the box when it comes to how are you going to actually create this information for others to consume. So what does it mean to create an effective knowledge transfer process? So knowledge transfer should occur with your organization deems as necessary in a manner of that's conducive to how you produce an operationally efficient process that supports your business goals and business objectives. That means looking at, again, for some organizations, it's all about internal knowledge transfer, right? You produce a product, you send it out to the customer doesn't need to know anything about that because it's shipped to them via Amazon.com, for instance. But if you are an organization like, for instance, a hospital, where you have certain knowledge and information that you have within house, and you send a patient home, guess what? That patient needs to know what to do once they arrive home. So you're sending that knowledge home with that patient so they can be successful in their recovery. And that applies in different types of settings. Same thing with, for instance, academia. We have a certain process within the academic body. We also transfer the information to our students for those students to benefit from that knowledge transfer and be successful not only as students, but as members of society and as members of workplaces. So what we should be doing is preparing those individuals for the workplace. And that means we have to be able to do so in a way that's going to benefit them in a way that they can learn the best. So employees that need to participate in knowledge sharing. Catherine alluded to, you got new hires that came into the process. They were sharing knowledge. You have to have managers and future leaders that are participating in the knowledge transfer process. You also have to have those individuals who are remote workers. They don't come into the office, but that information that needs to apply to them as a particular filling a particular role needs to be transferred back and forth. There are things that they're going to know because they're remote. They could be on a site, in another country, providing information back to your organization, right? So in this new dynamic in the workplace where we have people who can be anytime, anywhere in some cases, that knowledge needs to be able to flow across geographic boundaries and time zones. So what is success? So success usually comes to those who plan the work and work the plan. In other words, if you think you can put together a knowledge transfer process, plan, program without actually planning it and just start doing things, you're probably not going to be successful. So the goal is to create a plan on how are you going to actually start to implement this idea of knowledge transfer. And although it might exist in your organization, can you go to one place and say, hey, here's the plan on how we're going to do knowledge transfer If it exists, it might exist inside of an IT organization. It also might exist in some part of the business. But if that information is not provided to everyone so that everyone can understand what's required, then you're probably missing out. You're probably missing some notes here. HR should know about it because they have the responsibility around training and development, around onboarding. Like I said, throughout the organization, managers and leaders should know what's entailed, and it should be a part of everyone's performance plan to make sure that they understand the criticality of knowledge transfer. And the plan should be prioritized so that people can understand, what's important at this time, who's important, who's involved, who's communicated to, all those things that are necessary for it to actually filtrate throughout the organization. So let's not think of knowledge transfer as something that we do on our own, but we need to get others involved in that process. So what does that mean? How to effectively transfer knowledge. And seeing this quick 6-step process, it's just evident that, there are some things that need to be done, and most likely in this particular order. So 1, you need to identify the knowledge to be transferred. Everything is not important. Everything can't be important, because if it were, then nothing would get done. So find those things that are critical to your organization and identify the need and how are you going to actually transfer the information. Who's the target for that knowledge transfer? Who's going to be involved in the process to actually make it happen? You need to understand that, document that. Choose the right method. Again, knowledge transfer does not have to be a documentation. It could be a video. It could be a standard operating procedure. It could be an update in a system. It could be a workflow. So you need to understand the right method that's going to be required in order to support that knowledge transfer. Then it needs to develop a structured approach. So now that you know what you want to prioritize for knowledge transfer, figure out how are you going to best accomplish that. Who's going to be involved? When is it going to happen? How is it going to happen? The other factor that we talked about is everybody doesn't necessarily do knowledge transfer or want to do knowledge transfer. So when we have situations where people are resistant, we need to find a way to engage them so that they feel they're a part of the process, and that as a organization, it's going to benefit the organization, but it's also going to benefit them. And in some cases, it's going to be challenging to do that, but you have to use your management practices in order to get the individual to actually be engaged, to understand that this is best for the organization. And then, of course, we cannot forget that we need to measure and evaluate our success. So oftentimes we'll go off and do something, but there's no proof that it worked well. There's no proof that it was successful. There's not even proof that the activity even occurred. So if we create metrics around our knowledge transfer, we can start to measure our success. Like, how effective was the knowledge transfer? Did it impact the way that new employees who have little experience onboard and actually execute the process in the role that they currently are in? So you have an individual, like I've worked at manufacturing plants. An individual comes in to perform a certain function on the plant floor. Usually it takes 2 weeks because there's no effort to really transfer knowledge. We just put the person in a position and tell them to start working. You introduce a knowledge transfer program, and for that particular role, individual comes in and they ramp up and are on board in 1 week, right? Those are the kind of wins that you're looking for. Those are the kinds of metrics that you're looking for, the ones that show that as an organization, you're making strides in improvement. So we must think about metrics anytime we think about any type of process improvement. And knowledge transfer at this point is just another tool for process improvement. So one of the things you can do is develop a knowledge transfer plan. And that knowledge transfer plans, it does exactly what we spoke about a moment ago. It puts things in perspective. It's the what, who, why, how, when, and then the follow-up, right? It puts boundaries on when something starts and when it's supposed to be finished. Because if you don't put boundaries on it, it usually either starts and never finishes because nobody's following up on it, or it goes into oblivion. And if there's no end point, then you cannot measure success. And in the case where you have long-running knowledge transfer, it's just good to put milestones in. Check your milestones to see if you met those milestones. So if you have not thought about a knowledge transfer plan, that's one of the things you need to consider in your journey to knowledge transfer. And a deeper level knowledge transfer plan will also go into things like technology, right? That will help understand what the end goal is and how are you going to actually accomplish some of these things. So we can't forget that there are going to be many tools that we find available in helping us in our knowledge transfer. We just have to look for those. And I know I'm running up on an hour. I'll be finished in a moment. Be patient with me. So the responsibility for developing knowledge transfer plan to address your experienced worker needs, workers leaving the workplace, and the new individuals who come into your workplace who have a lack of knowledge, or for those who are transferring to roles they are unfamiliar with, then it's, again, everybody's responsibility to make sure that knowledge is being transferred. That's the human resources, the line manager, experienced workers, other stakeholders. Each of us have different stakeholders inside of our prospective organization, and we need to know who those individuals are. We need to get their buy-in. We need to make sure we have the support, and we need to make sure that they understand the objective of what we're trying to accomplish, that the goal is to make us a better organization, improve efficiencies, and reduce recidivism, and increase the amount of retention for those individuals who will come back to the organization or stay with the organization. So additional tips for developing a successful knowledge transfer plan: don't wait till the last minute. It's something you have on your mind, you need to start early. You need to identify the critical knowledge that's necessary. You have to have a starting point. Like I said, everything can't be of the same priority. Find what's important. Find one thing that you want to focus on and make that your goal for whatever amount of time it takes for you to accomplish it. So if you want to look at a particular role on your nursing team or within your medical team, then look at that role. Look at that one task that's not well understood and make sure you nail it down. Put some metrics around it, you know. So you have to identify those specific priorities within your particular organizational domain and industry. Choose the right method, right? You're going to have different approaches on how to actually capture that knowledge. And we talked about a few of those things early. Document everything. If you don't document everything, then someone can't come behind you and understand what the process was that you took and the information that you gathered in order to come up with this knowledge transfer plan. Make it ongoing. It's not a one-time affair. If you do something well, you can probably do it better. So keep doing it and keep trying different things so that you find success. And more or less, a lot of times it is a nurture that you're facing. It's not so much that it can't be done. It is finding the time and having the energy to actually set a goal and fulfill that one goal. If you take on too much, you will not likely succeed. So make it an achievable goal. And then, as I said before, be able to measure that success, because you want to be able to share that success with your organization. Here's what we did. Here's the information that we retained. Here's how it's helping the organization going forward. We think we can do another project or two within the next quarter to do the same thing and improve the bottom line in this particular area, or improve retention for these particular individuals who are fulfilling these roles. And so let's do this poll. How is your organization, or how has your organization typically transferred knowledge from departing experienced workers to younger colleagues? And I think I have like maybe 2 more slides and we'll be complete. I'll leave it to Amber. So
I think we're good to end it now. Okay. 0% is former mentorship programs with assigned peers. 0% informal shadowing opportunities to observe experienced workers. 13% documentation and knowledge repositories for self-guided learning. A combination of all above is 63%. None of the above, it happens organically through everyday interactions, is 25%.
Okay, great. And that 63% is the best approach, right? You can't have one solution that solves all your problems. You do have to use a variation of methods in order to be successful. And again, that allows people to use their best skill sets, availability, and things they're comfortable with doing as far as their knowledge transfer. So a combination of all those is the best approach. So my final thoughts are, use a combination of human system and artificial intelligence, is what we just talked about, right? If you don't have a formal mentorship program, that's something you want to consider. I found in my particular case, I have a mentorship relationship with an executive. And it's not so much in helping me do my job, more so than giving me more information about the organization and making me more comfortable to have conversations at a higher level with the organization. Then there's cross-training initiatives. If you're not doing cross-training initiatives, it can be difficult, but it's something that organizations need to consider. That would be even things like job shadowing, right? Resources are already busy. How do you find time to let one resource go do something else when X needs to be completed? Those are the things that we have to get better at juggling. And hopefully, again, you have like interns on board and you have artificial intelligence that may help with some part of your person's role and responsibility, reduce some of the overhead in that job. That might help give them and free up some time for them to actually do some cross-training. Investment in knowledge management systems. So if you're doing everything by typing it out in a Word document and sticking it on SharePoint, then it's more likely you're probably going to have a lot of issues around knowledge transfer, because it's very inefficient, even though it is a way to do it. It's a manual system. It works for some, depending on the size of your organization, but the larger your organization gets and the larger your knowledge transfer needs get, you're going to need something that's going to assist you with that, who has knowledge management built into it. So when you have individuals who are going to leave the organization, another thing you could do is like a retirement workshop. Judy's leaving this role. She's been here for 10, 15 years. We like to have a couple of days with her to actually talk about some of the things that she knows that's not so visibly understood and known, that might help onboard or get other people aware of what they need to look out for in order to actually fill the shoes that she's going to leave. And then focus on building a culture of knowledge sharing. That cultural part is the key aspect of everything. And then over to the side, I also use AI to assist in the process. So we'll be learning more about how AI can help us over the next couple of years. it can only get better. And I'm certainly it will reduce the headaches that you might have with your knowledge transfer at this time. And then last poll, I just want to make sure, I want to see if anybody's using AI. What type of AI powered tools or platforms are you using? You know, as I said before, I teach a graduate class, and I do see the use of AI as a part of our tools like Microsoft Excel. Is being built into the browser now when you're doing searches. You can use ChatGPT to actually reword and improve documentation. There's chat that has AI that's collecting information, storing that information, different mechanisms that are actually being used that I find useful. And so, see what we get.
Okay, we have 20% chatbots with knowledge bases, 0% AI-powered search engines for internal documents, 20% personalized learning recommendations and content curation, 0% AI-assisted knowledge capture and documentation tools, 80% none, 0% other.
Yeah. And you know that AI assisted like chatbot, I mean, actually chatbots, right? So chatbot is a pretty, in my experience, dumb tool for actually understanding the workflow and getting things done. Now, the AI assisted chatbot will bring a lot more capability to the conversation because it is more conversational. It does have access to backend information. It can actually do some program reasoning, and it will sound and seem more like a real interaction rather than these what we call dumb chatbots. You know, as a technologist, that's one of the things I also do as I work in robotics process automation and have looked at chatbots as a solution for dealing with some internal questions and issues, and found it to be more than overwhelming trying to actually get it to be useful. So I definitely can sympathize with people who are challenged with knowledge transfer, but I think it's going to get easier. We just have to make sure that we are ready for the change when it comes. So don't be behind the 8 ball as far as your knowledge is concerned around technology. Try to stay above and abreast of what's going on with technology because it will make your knowledge transfer journey much easier. We can't allow the hype to get the best of us, but when we're knowledgeable about how it can help us, then that will make us better agents of change. And with that, that ends the presentation.